Hello, Chef. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing well.
Welcome to Ernesto.
Also good to be here.
Come on in. Happy to have you.
I'm really excited to be here.
So am I. You're going to see a lot of great stuff. And see the way we do everything.
Nice. I'm really excited to see what you guys got cooking up today.
We have a lot to show you. We're going to show you how we make our callos. These are house special tripes. We're going to do a dish with morcilla, which is our blood sausage. We're going to show you all the steps from beginning to end, how it's made, how it's produced, and how we incorporate it into one of our many dishes that we apply it with. So come on. My name is Ryan Bartlow. I am the executive chef and co-owner of Ernesto's, located in the Lower East Side of New York City. Callos to me is a very satisfying dish. Mainly because the way we do it here, a lot of people initially are turned off from hearing about tripe and offals, yet once they taste this, they realize how much, I think it just feels very soulful and loving, and there's so much power that's put through gently to create something that's only, I don't know, 5 ounces in a little vessel. And we're gonna go through that. But like I said before, tripe is a very, very common dish, callos, found all over Spain, and it's distinctly regional. This one particularly is more reflective of what you might see in Madrid, but I learned it from a Catalan chef in the Basque country, and each region kind of has their own. So, like I said before, this is a Madrid version taught to me by a Catalan chef in a Basque restaurant. So, you're really getting hybrid of ideas and a collection of techniques and methods. So to start the recipe off, very important, blanched tripe. Blanching just means that it was in a pot of hot water. We let it boil, take out some of the impurities, discard that water, and put it back on the tray. The foundation of the tripe itself is essentially just, or the callos, I should say. The first step is basically boiling all the meat till it's tender. And by boiling all that meat, you're left with a very rich, gelatinous stock. And that will be the foundation of the second part of the recipe. In the initial part, in the initial boil of the callos, whatever you want to call it, is the callos themselves. Very important. Veal hooves. Okay, we split them. That's going to expose the gelatin even more. There's usually some kind of smoky, dried pork component that I prefer. Sometimes it's dried smoked morcilla. This one in particular is a pork knuckle, pork hock. It's been smoked. It has a lot of salt to it, but it's going to add another layer of flavor to the entire thing. Lastly, some people like to put manitas or pig's feet, pig's trotters in their callos. I would do that on occasion. It usually stems from what I have on hand, which is also just a greater discussion about what we're talking about here. Something like tripe, which came from probably a dish that was based on what was left over, what was sitting around, what was accessible, what was cheap, has now become more or less a trendy item that's held very highly and in some circles quite luxurious, just based on the amount of discussion it's had over the last couple hundreds of years. Getting back to what I was saying, the last item that I'm putting in today are pigtails. They yield a great amount of meat, there's a luxurious amount of fat, and the bone has a lot of gelatin. On top of putting this in the pot to get the callos going, very important, you want to flavor that water with a little bit of a bouquet garni. Okay, so very classic. Juniper berries, peppercorns, bay leaf, thyme, clove. We're going to wrap it in cheesecloth, tie it up, And the final component, a little bit of aromatic, very classic. Leek, carrots, 2 cloves of garlic, onions studded with 2 cloves. That's it. We're gonna let this go low and slow for about 5 hours. Next step, we're starting to cook the callos, okay, and all the other products. So I always put the bouquet down first. I like to weigh down the bouquet and the vegetables. Bouquet garni, like I said, is the aromatic herbs, okay, and the cheesecloth. I'm gonna put that down. Now I'm gonna put down the onion, carrots, leek, 2 cloves of garlic, only 2, that's all you need. Next, veal, okay? Veal. This is all the gelatin right here. Trotter, excuse me, tail, pigtail, not trotter. But trotters are fine as well. Hawk, and the callos themselves. Next, very important, cold water. We're going to fill this with cold water, put it on a low flame, let it come up gently. Just as if you were doing a stock, you always want to start with cold water and let everything rise slowly so you're not getting this kind of congested, impurity-laden stock. It should all come up low and slow. Better safe than sorry. But again, if you outsource proper ingredients, good quality ingredients, as you can see, there isn't much to it. Half of making good food is finding good ingredients, I think. This should do it. Obviously, when you put a lid on it, it will stain. You don't want too much water. This is the perfect amount. Alright. So here we are, 5 hours later. Wow. It's perfect. You can see everything's cooked and tender, but not completely falling apart yet. And there's a tremendous amount of fat and gelatin in here naturally, which for the most part we want to keep because we're going to bind it in the sofrito with more or less a roux, and that's going to carry out all that flavor that we do not want to lose. Let's see how we did. Okay. Let's the tripe itself. Here. Veal huff. Tail. Look at that. You can just see it. It's perfect. More tail. Huff, and more hawk. So, very, 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 very important. This liquid is just as important as the solid here. This is the fundamental foundation of the tripe. So what I like to do is strain it, and then we're going to utilize this as we make our sofrito, which is going to be the base of the next step of the callos. Okay? So, carefully take a chinois. That's it. the liquid agent for the callos. All right here. Doesn't look that different than maybe like a katsu broth. It's not, it didn't roll super hard, so it's not emulsified, but it's just, there's a lot of fat in it, which is what we want.
3.
All right, so the next step, part 2 of the callos. Very important, the fundamental flavor of the stew is the sofrito. So again, like I said, a lot of these dishes, these guisos, these stews, are byproducts of what's left over, what's on hand, what can we use to create another dish with, create another meal. In most Spanish households, restaurants, they usually trim from embutidos, from cured meats, from jamon, and that's what we're doing today. So we're starting the sofrito out with a little bit of jamon picada, so diced jamon iberico, chorizo iberico as well, so small dice of a drier chorizo iberico, minced onion, minced garlic, pimenton, very important. I have 2 kinds in here, sweet and hot, okay? If you can see, there's 1 cayenne or guindilla dried chili for a little bit of heat and spice. And I do tomato product 2 ways. Tomato paste for its concentration and its sugar, and then just a nice puree canned tomato, like a tomato pasada, which is going to add some acidity. So we're going to start with all these things, get them all sweating. I'm going to use a little olive oil. We're going to bind it with flour here, which in theory then creates essentially a roux. After the roux is formed, it's going to get real tight. And how do we thin it out? With that same cuisson, caldo, cooking liquid that came from boiling all these meats. And the last part I'm going to show you is while the sofrito is working, these meats are cooling down enough for us to handle and fold back into the stew. And then the stew needs to cook another hour or 2 until it all comes together and it's nice and tender, but not too tender. And we're ready to eat. Okay. Heat's important. You want heat enough to break down the ingredients and start to cook them, but the flame needs to be controlled. Okay, you talk to people like Dave Pasternak, Alain Passard. Controlling the flame, very important. It doesn't need to be ripping. I don't want to burn anything. I want things to sweat, get a little transparent. Okay, so step 1, aceite de oliva. Okay, this is a beautiful olive oil from Jaén, Spain. We're going to start with all that jamon. Of the chorizo iberico. Chorizo itself is very flavorful, so I think this will sustain this batch. We'll add the onions now. I don't mind them sweating at the same time as the jamon. I love onions. Because naturally there's a lot of salt in the jamon and the chorizo, I'm going to be very careful as to how much salt I'm going to need to season this part of the sofrito with. I probably won't add any seasoning until after the roux is formed and I add the cooking liquid from the first cook of the callos back to here. Then we'll adjust. As you can see, you can hear it, smell it. A lot of people are cautious to add garlic now. That's usually because their pot is too high and they burn everything. But I think having the garlic on here is a fundamental part. The aromas are incredible. start to see fat is being released, more oil is being released from the jamon and chorizo. The garlic is perfuming. The onions are becoming translucent. Probably another 30 seconds, and I'll add the pimentón. I'll add more of the dry. Then I'll add the tomato, cook the tomato a little bit. Lastly, we'll add the flour. Okay. Pimentón goes in. Not that different if you were making a Thai curry. You want to let the heat cook the dry ingredients as well too, so the spices get perfumed. Smells good, huh?
Smells really good.
Really good. Okay. Everything's been rendered. Everything is perfuming. Everything is gentle. I feel confident now adding the tomato paste. And pureed tomato. Okay. Now it's seasoned. Okay. A little more. Again, you want to cook this out slightly. The aroma is incredible. Last thing, we're going to kiss this all with flour. Not that different than making biscuits and gravy. Look at that. It's tightening up, seizing up. Okay. Just as if you were going to make pâte choux on top of the stove. The flour is even cooking. How do we loosen it all up? All that liquid we had before. I started with a metal spoon. At this point, I go to a wooden spoon. Now, I like to start with less liquid to catch the roux and see where we're at and adjust it, as opposed to adding too much liquid and starting from a product that's too thin to begin with. Naturally, this will all come together.
Smells good enough
Wow.
to eat now.
No, it's fucking awesome. So, sometimes a whisk is helpful to kind of break up those clumps of the roux, and just like that, you're seeing it before our eyes become as one. And this is the foundation, the first part of the second half of the callos.
How long will this cook for?
Well, this will cook. At this point, normally what we'll do is have that stuff ready to go and fold that in. So this cooks for another 5 minutes, and you add in all that boiled meat back into here. So the tripe's been cooked. Now we want to cut it down into pieces to fold it back into the sofrito that's been thinned out with the cooking liquid. I like squares about this size. Doesn't have to be perfect, but consistent. About 1 inch squares. Okay. Smells good. You also want the callos to be tender, but not completely falling apart, because it is going to go back in the pot for another hour or two. You got to think of it like barbecue. When you watch some of those barbecue masters, there should be a give to the ribs or the brisket, but it's never completely just falling off the bone. Then the technique isn't what it's supposed to be. Same thing with this. So again, the hock, very important. Bone comes right out. This step is also important, making sure you get all the little bones out of all this meat. I don't mind nice chunks of some of the hock meat. Okay, I think it's delicious. Cut this up too, kind of to reflect the size of the tripe. This is the skin. It's all good stuff here. It's all gonna make that stew that much more perfect. Okay. Same thing with the veal hook. We'll open it up. Okay. And debone it carefully as we can. So there's a bone. There's a bone. But the beauty is all that time that it took to cook all this stuff, unless it's bone or cartilage, it's edible. And even some of the cartilage inside, once it's chopped up, is going to liquefy and be that much better and helpful in the final product. So, I'll give this a chop. One more chop. I kind of like seeing these pieces floating around. Makes me happy. This is all good stuff. Add all this. Last with the pigtail, same thing. This is excellent, excellent meat. It's from Kinderhook Farms, Hudson, New York, upstate. There's the tail. Here's the end of the tail. Probably one more little bone here. But again, feel for any little bones, and what you're left with is pure flavor. I'm using all of this. All this is going in. And that's the thing we do at Ernesto's. We don't waste anything. This is real cooking that's been passed down to me from cooking out of necessity and tradition. So, look, bones yield. Okay? All good stuff. Tripe. Butterfly this open again. This is the other peel hook. Feeling for bones, chopping. I think we're good to go. Now all the meat's been cut up, and I'm going to add it back to the sofrito that's been thinned out with some of the cooking liquid that this was all cooked in. I might have to add more, but let's just get this going. So carefully, because I'm making a mess. In. Okay. That's a good bit. Put that on a little bit. Now. Wow. Look at that. I'm going to taste it. See if we need salt. It looks already a little thick, so I'm going to probably thin it out with a little bit more of the cooking liquid. It's perfect. It's perfect. But considering it's going to cook, I have all this liquid. I'm going to add this. It's still going to come down and reduce it just perfectly where I want to. So I want to get it back to where it is now. Once this liquid comes down. So I'd say in about an hour, hour and a half, considering this is a little bit of a smaller batch than we normally do, it'll be ready to go. All right, as you can see, time has passed. The stew has reduced. It has a beautiful sheen to it. Okay, it's gelatinous. Yeah, not to the point where it's sticky, and yeah, it looks delectable. I would love a big bowl of this right now, and I think we're gonna each have one. So I'm gonna give it one last taste for seasoning, and if I feel it's ready, we're gonna serve it up. One last stir. Never want things to roll too hard for too long. And I'm constantly stirring because you don't want it to stick. That's it. So now this is the best part of the whole thing. I'm going to ladle it up, and myself, you, and the rest of the team are going to eat some for lunch. So here we go. Perfect. A little bit of salt. And drip on the plate a little bit. But essentially, that's what you're looking for.
Amazing mouthful.
the nourishing stew that makes me the happiest. ¿Cómo va bien, no? How is it? Pretty good, huh?